let's start here. All right. So this is the first of the three peace lectures, and this one is about this. Really, I just think this is a tremendous film by Nadine Labaki, who is a really fine filmmaker, and it's based. I'm going to talk about the fact that it's fabular. It's a fabular text, but first I want to talk about its origin, and its origin is the play Lysistrata, which is the clear sort of it's a known, famous, now sort of 2,400-year-old plot basically, and it. I think the reason that it's famous is that it's an idea that makes sense in a certain at a certain cultural level. It's just like this idea just makes sense. It was first performed. The play was first performed in 411 BCE. It is the before the Common Era, as it's called, and it's a play by Aristophanes. It's a comedy. A comedy in the Aristotelian sense, because these are Greek plays, does not mean it's not a bunch of yucks. It doesn't mean, haha, this is funny. It means that the overall story ends well, as opposed to ending in tragedy, where somebody winds up, getting their eyes gouged out and killing their father and, raping their mother and or whatever. It's just like the typical Greek sort of disaster. These tragedies are just so wild and crazy. Anyway. And in this case, the women in Greece, the women of Greece, take over the government treasury. So they sort of take over the bank, effectively. And they protect it. And they refuse to let go of the treasury. And they refuse, they withhold all sexual favors until their husbands stop fighting the Peloponnesian War. And that's the play, basically. And as I say, it ends well. I mean, there's tough stuff in it, but it ends well. Another film which is close to Lysistrata and also comes out around the same time, actually the same year, which is really something. I don't know if there was a discussion between these two filmmakers, or they just sort of happened to wind up making this film at the same time. It makes sense because by 2011, every single nation on the planet seemed to be at war, and often the wars were completely pointless to. I mean, the politicians who were presumably producing reasons for them just couldn't produce reasons for them. They were just like, well, we're there now and we're not leaving. It's like, well, maybe you should leave. It's like if you go on a bad holiday and things get worse and worse and worse, you go home, right? Okay, well, not if male honor is involved. Oh no, we can't be having that. So the other movie is called The Source, sometimes known as La Source des Femmes, which is the source of, not the source of women, but women's source. And it was directed by Radu Miaianu. I'm sorry, I butchered that Romanian. And it's also set in some myth that doesn't exist village in North Africa, although this one is not set in North Africa that we can tell. It's set somewhere in a small Middle Eastern village. I mean, we don't really know where. And again, the women engage in a sex strike because they want a water pipe. Basically, they want a well. And in the French, la source. It's one of those wonderful words which can mean well and also means it's like the word fountain for us. It's like, it's a fountain of, and fountain has more. It's like a fountain. You don't sort of necessarily think, you think, yeah, that's water. But you don't say to somebody, go to the fountain and bring me back a drink. Although people still do talk about the soda fountain. But so source, la source, in French has these sort of wonderful connotations, and in English, well does not have those same connotations. So it's one of those words which works in French, doesn't work so well in English. because you want what you want to get is the sense of this is the spring, and spring is perhaps better for us. This is the spring from which things, a fountain from which things come. And La Source is a lot less warm and cuddly than Where Do We Go Now? And it's much more realistic, but it's also excellent and timely. Just because it's tougher doesn't mean you shouldn't see it. I mean, I recommend it. But it is also about women who withhold sexual favors because they want this well. And the men are like, it's not important. And what's happening is that the women have to walk up this slippery hill, basically, to get to a water pipe that they have. And every time somebody slips, they have a miscarriage. I mean, the pregnant women have to go up this hill as well. And they slip, and it's this tough desert terrain, and they fall, and these are grievous falls. And so they have these miscarriages. So they're like, okay, we're tired of that. So no more sexual favors. And the men initially accept it, and then they start beating the women. And that is hard. So as I say, the second film, La Source, or La Source des Femmes, I recommend it, but if you have a hard time with, I mean, who doesn't? I hope that we all have a hard time with seeing anybody getting beaten, but it's tough. But they hold on, right? And it is quote unquote an Aristotelian comedy in the sense that things come out well. Just no pun intended. It's clear, however, from the opening that although there's the same kind of thing, it's like, okay, that's it. No more sex for you. That we're in a fable here. It's not a fairy tale. It's a fable, and this is the same territory we were in sort of about 5 weeks ago, if you count actual lectures 5 weeks ago. I'm not sure how long it was in time. It feels like it could have been maybe 5 or 10 years ago, or maybe 5 minutes ago. I'm not really sure what day it is, or where I'm sitting. Have I said this before? I'm not even sure if I've said this before. So, but it's clear from the opening of Where Do We Go Now? That this is not a fairy tale, but it is a story. And in the same way that, as I say, O'Brien says, this is a story. You are reading a story. And there are real reasons, and you're told this in rhyme too. There as the title cards indicate. There was or was there or wasn't there. It's great because the beginning is there was or wasn't there. It's a wonderful beginning that is. It's like it's like this. The narrator says there was a story or wasn't there. And it's like so it's just wonderful. It's sort of it's like now we enter the magic world of storytelling. And there are reasons for using this kind of fabular narrative, which make a lot of sense. The first one, there are 4 of them. Okay. I can think of dozens, but these are the 4 that really sort of are maybe going to be the most useful. The first one is that you can't get hung up on specifics because you're told it's a fable you're watching, right? And this is a fable, and so if you think it's specifically about this or specifically about that, well, that's on you. Well, the text isn't saying that. The text isn't saying, and this is an allegory for the way that white people have treated indigenous populations in North America. It's like, could be. Yeah, could be. But could be something else, right? So that's the thing about a fable, is that it's open to what do you make of it? So that's the first thing, is you can't get hung up on specifics. The second thing is you can't get angry and divided about the politics because there are no quote-unquote real politics, in the sense that, you can't say, well, this is why the Israelis are right to have their land claims on the West Bank justified. It is like, whoa. We don't want to get into a fight about who is right in Israel and Palestine. We don't want to get into that because then we're going to get lost. People have, and so on. Everybody's got a position. It's like, so you don't say it's about that. You say, this is about these two people, these two groups. And so you're like, oh, okay. All right, so this isn't, you're not telling me a story here about something I deeply care about. It's like, no. This is wholly different. You're like, oh, all right. Okay, so you let it go, right? Because there are no specific politics, you're like, okay, I'll let it go. The third thing is that because it isn't specific, the story has more lasting power. If it were about a particular war, if you didn't care about the war, you wouldn't look. If you don't care about World War One, and this says, oh, a fable about World War One, like War Horse. It's like people are like, oh, I'm not interested in World War One. I don't want to see it. It's like, okay. Or you don't care about horses. Okay. So it's a story. It's like, oh, well, I like stories. Is it a good story? It's like, yeah, it's a good story. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'll see that. So the idea here is that we start caring about the characters and we take them into our hearts, basically, and our imaginations. And we don't want bad things to happen to them because we like them and we're like, we want their best. We're like, oh, yeah, I want them to be happy. And, because if they're happy, then, and we believe in them, then we'll be happy. It's just one of these ways that art, aligns us. And the fourth thing is that in fables, magic and song and miracles are all okay. Because basically sort of anything can happen. In a fable you're like, and then, the prince came back from the prince came back from the bottom of the lake, having been there for 3 days, and people are like, okay, that's just how it is. I mean, the prince is somehow able to survive at the bottom of the lake. People are like, all right, that's fine. So it's possible in this case, in this miraculous case, for, say, a statue to cry real tears or tears of blood, and for actual things to happen. Now, the thing is, it's not reliable, right? You can't say, well, we'll just wait for magic to intervene. It's like, no, that's not how this works. And this is the underpinning of something like magic realism, where magic occurs and it's part of the everyday. That is, there is magic, but you don't rely on magic. You can't say, well, magic will just fix this. It's like, no. It's just that there are things in the world which are more than the world. So that if you think, I don't know, let's say there's this wonderful scene in a magic realist film where a butterfly flies through a courtyard, and then it lands on the wall, and then it becomes a painting. And the girl who is the subject of the scene watches this beautiful butterfly. It's blue, and then she watches it land on the wall, and then it becomes this little painting. And then she goes over and touches it, because, like, did that happen? Was that real? That's magic realism, because it's like magical things exist. Amazing things happen. And sometimes you're the only one who sees them, and nobody else will believe you, and you don't even bother telling anybody else because it was so wonderful, So there's a good reason for this, but because if miracles are okay, then they can be included in the rules, which means that it's not that anything can happen, but that when things that are surprising happen, you're like, okay, the rules of this are bigger than quote unquote real life, which is like, oh, this is how it works. Okay, so I want to show the 3 clips, or I want to talk about 3 clips of the cemetery, because the cemetery is basically the beginning, middle, and the end of this text, and it is what the text fundamentally is about. It's like, where are we going to go? Okay, so but this first one is magical. Okay.
حكايتي وما فيها خيالات صحرا سود، لا هن قمار ولا هن ورود، عيونن كحلة رماد وتيكبروا الولاد، حكم عليهم الزمان يلبسوا تياب أسود.